Right, very good morning to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us today in our second episode of Mukbang with FTAs. Introduction to free trade agreements. So last week we gave a very broad introduction of what free trade agreements are in the context of international trade and how companies can benefit from them. Today, we will cover the very basics of how companies can enjoy cost competitiveness from tariff preferences. So as promised, you will not hear that much from me this week. So we have May Yan from Enterprise Singapore, or ESG, this week as our expert speaker. You may already be familiar with ESG, which is the government agency set up to help Singapore companies build capabilities, innovate, internationalize, and to develop resilient and competitive industries. So we're very happy to have May Yan, who's expert on this, speaking for us today. But before I share the spotlight with her reluctantly, I want to highlight that our third and final episode of this series is next week at the same time. We should go a bit into the rules of origin for qualifying for tariff preferences. And also, if you have any FTA questions stemming from this webinar or even from beyond this, please write in to us. Our email address is fta@sbf.org.sg. Last week, we received a number of questions. We responded to most of you. If not, you have asked already smart and difficult questions that we need to craft our answers quite carefully. Many of these questions are also quite insightful. So we are considering whether we can do a panel discussion with certain experts to discuss some of these issues that you have raised on the broader context. So we inform you through our mailing list. We managed to organize this. So please keep a lookout for that. At the end of today's webinar, there will also be a super short feedback at the end, like last week. So please hang on for that last minute so that we can, better serve your needs in the future. Now, without further ado, I'll hand over the time to May Yan.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm May Yan. Okay, so I'll just start my sharing right now. Okay, so today I'll be talking about or sharing with you about how do FTAs make your exports more price competitive. Okay, so I'll touch on Singapore's FTAs again. You'll see some familiar slides as you saw last week. Okay, I'll go through some of the FTAs and our bilateral as well as the regional FTAs and how they can enhance the price competitiveness of your products and how certain facilitative provisions in our FTAs can help in your exports. And last but not least, an FTA tool, which is very useful, which you can tap on to help in finding more information about like tariffs and make your work a bit easier. Okay. Now, if you have seen last week, this map, which is Singapore's network of FTA and EPAs, Singapore currently has 26 agreements in force with 65 trading partners. Okay, why 26 agreements but 65 trading partners? Okay, because as you can see here, certain agreements are a regional agreement. For example, like our ASEAN FTA or ASEAN Plus FTA. So it's one FTA but with 10 member ASEAN countries, or 10 plus 1. Okay, the most recently implemented FTA is the EU-Singapore FTA with the 28 member states. Okay, that was implemented in November last year. Okay, so you can also see from this map that for some of the FTAs, we have bilateral FTAs with them as well as regional with the same country. Okay, so for example, for example, with China, we have like CS FTA and ASEAN FTA. Okay, Korea as well, we have bilateral as well as regional FTAs with them. Okay. Now there are also a few pending FTAs pending implementation and under negotiations. For example, the RCEP as you have heard, right? It is a regional comprehensive economic partnership, an agreement with a total of 16 partners, okay, provided if India is in. Okay, it's 9 ASEAN member states plus China, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and maybe India. This FTA has already been concluded and currently it's pending implementation. Now, the other 3 FTAs which is undergoing negotiation is the EAEU, Pacific Alliance, and Mercosur. Okay, for EAEU, the trade in goods chapter has already been concluded. Now we are currently negotiating on the services and investment, the other chapters. Okay, so for these FTAs that's undergoing negotiations, right, if you do have any feedback, for example, if you're experiencing like high tariffs for your products in this market, do let us know, as current negotiation is still going on. So we can feedback to MTI to make the FTA more useful for you. Okay. Now, this slides actually will help to help you to identify the possible agreements that you can use for your exports. For example, we've often heard companies saying that, oh, Singapore has so many FTAs, so which is the one that I should choose to use, or how do I know which FTA to use? So it's actually very important to know your export destination. First thing you need to find out is that where is your goods going to, and where is your last place of manufacture of your product. Okay, so if you're exporting to ASEAN member states, for example, Malaysia or Vietnam, okay, the possible FTAs that you can use includes the ASEAN and ASEAN Plus FTA, as shown in this the third column, which is ATIGA, ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement. It can be ASEAN Australia New Zealand FTA, because the ASEAN member states are all part of the FTA. In addition, for Vietnam, on top of the ASEAN Plus FTA, there's also the CPTPP, okay, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, where Vietnam is part of it. So it really depends on your export destination. And if it is exporting to a country like, for example, New Zealand, you also have a few choices or options. Okay. So those highlighted in red here, they cannot be used at the moment because it's not implemented yet. Or like, for example, for Malaysia, although CPTPP has been implemented, but Malaysia has not ratified it. So for Malaysia, the options are only the ASEAN and ASEAN Plus FTA for now. Okay, for a full list of the implemented FTAs, you can actually check on ESG FTA website. Okay, there are also certain markets where you only have one choice, because so far we only have one FTA with them. So for countries like Canada, Mexico, so we have implemented the CPTPP. Similarly for Canada and Mexico, they have already ratified it. So for your exports to Canada, Mexico, or even Chinese Taipei, okay, you can tap on the respective FTA, and that is so far the only FTA. So for US, again, it is just US-Singapore FTA. It's a bilateral FTA. Okay. Now I'll go into how FTAs can enhance the price competitiveness of your products. Now this is a typical pricing model of your product. Okay, from the perspective of your potential buyer, okay, when you sell a product to them, right? To them it might not be the value of the products that they are only paying for. So when a product crosses the border, there may be customs duties, excise duties, or internal tax imposed on the product. So it depends on what product it is. Okay, different markets have different duties on impose different duties on different products. So these duties, right, are actually paid to the importing customs authority. Okay. However, for excise duties and internal tax, right, they are imposed on locally produced goods as well as foreign produced goods. Okay, so to your potential buyer or the importer, they may be considering whether to buy products from their domestic supplier or to import the product for foreign markets, like for example yourself from Singapore. So this may be some considerations that they will look into. But since excise duties and internal tax, they are actually imposed on locally and foreign produced goods, so that's even out the playing field. However, for customs duty, it is actually imposed on foreign produced goods only. And this is where FTA comes in. Okay, FTAs will eliminate or reduce this customs duty. Okay, so again, your importer will be happy to know that if you are able to help them eliminate or not pay this customs duty, and that will increase the price competitiveness of your goods. Okay, I have this example here. Assuming you are exporting sweet biscuits containing cocoa, and with this HS code of 19053120 to Vietnam. Okay, Vietnam has an import duty of 15% for this product. Okay, and here we're looking at if using ATIGA, AANZ FTA, or the CPTPP. Okay, so without FTA, not using any FTA, of course your importer will have to pay this import duty of 15%. But under ATIGA and AANZ FTA, Vietnam has committed to eliminate the duty from 15% to 0. Okay, so if you can actually provide them with a preferential certificate of origin, okay, a certificate showing that your product is of Singapore or ASEAN or the respective FTA origin, okay, they can actually save on this these duties of 15%. So if you have an export value of 500,000, okay, the tariff savings for your importer is 75,000. Let's look at CPTPP. Now, CPTPP for Vietnam, right? They've just implemented it, and as you can see here, it's actually a reduced customs duty from 15% to 3.7%. That is in this year, 2020. Okay, so for Vietnam, it is on a phased elimination phase, in a sense that next year, this 3.7% will be eliminated. Okay, so for next year, if you have to use CPTPP, this year your importer will still need to pay 3.7%. However, from next year onwards, it will be 0. Hence, the savings will be $75,000 for them as well from next year onwards. Okay, but what's important to note is that in order for your importer to enjoy this preferential tariff treatment, the product actually needs to meet rules of origin criteria. Okay, so a very quick a glance at the criteria, as we'll go more into details about rules of origin in the next webinar next week. Okay, so in order for the biscuits, right, to to not have duties imposed on these biscuits, they need to satisfy the rules of origin criteria. If you're using ATIGA, okay, the rules of origin is a regional value content of at least 40% or a change in the HS code at 4-digit level for the non-originating materials. Okay, so similarly for AANZ FTA, but CPTPP has slightly different rules of origin criteria. So the manufacturer will need to take note of the rules of origin criteria. Although ATIGA and AANZ can give a 0 preferential tariff rate, but whether are they able to meet the rules of origin criteria. So for example, if for your biscuits, right, some of the ingredients comes from CPTPP member country. Okay, so perhaps you have no choice, then you need to use CPTPP in order to meet the rules of origin criteria. So at least there is some savings in terms of customs duty for your importer. And when you export your product, you need to export with the preferential certificate of origin. For ATIGA and AANZ FTA, it has to be issued by Singapore Customs. Okay, it's a Form D and a Form AANZ. However, if you're using CPTPP, it is actually self-certification, okay, certifying that the product has met the rules of origin criteria. Okay, the next example I'd like to share is using exporting Alkyd resins of HS code 390750 to China using ASEAN-China FTA or China-Singapore FTA. So we have two FTAs with China at the moment. One is a regional FTA, the other is a bilateral FTA. So for this product, there is a customs duty of 10% in China. Okay, preferential rate under both FTAs is 0. So again, assuming if you have an export value of 500,000 for this product to China, okay, the tariff savings for your importer is actually 50,000. So it looks like it's the same, right, under both FTAs. However, both FTA, even for the same product, okay, going to China, under different FTAs have different rules of origin criteria. So as you can see here, ASEAN-China FTA, the regional FTA, the rules of origin for this product is a regional value content of at least 40%. Okay, whereas for CSFTA, which is just between Singapore and China, besides the regional value content of at least 40%, which you can accumulate only for originating materials from China or Singapore, okay, there is another rule, which is a chemical reaction rule. So it depends on which rule your product can meet, your manufacturing process can meet in order to enjoy the preferential tariff treatment in China. Okay, and of course, before the export of the product, you'll need to apply for a preferential certificate of origin from Singapore Customs. Now, this third example I'd like to share is using the EU-Singapore FTA. Okay, although EU has got 28 member states, right, but it's actually one customs union. Okay, so in this case, as you can see here, for the EU-Singapore FTA, right, the elimination of the duties are again in phases. Okay, either it is immediately eliminated on the day of implementation, which is on the 21st of November for some products, okay, or it is on the year 3. If not, then it is year 5. Okay, so I have two examples here where the products can enjoy immediate elimination on the 21st of November, okay, under this HS code 850650, which is primary cells and primary batteries, or 151550, which is your sesame oil and its fractions. Okay, like for example, the sesame oil, it has an import duties of 9.6% in EU, okay, what they call as base rate. Okay, on the day where this FTA is implemented, which is on the 21st of November, if your product meets the rules of origin criteria under the EU-Singapore FTA, it will be 0 duties. Okay, and it is throughout as well, provided your product meets the rules of origin criteria. Now, for another product example, our bihun, okay, which is 190219 HS code, the base rate in the EU is 7.7% plus 24.6 euros per 100 kilogram. Okay, so without FTA, your importer will need to pay this duty. However, under the EU-Singapore FTA, although it is not an immediate elimination, okay, but it is also a phased elimination. So as you can see here, from EIF and year 1, year 2, there is a reduction in the customs duty. Okay, until in year 3, which is 21st November 2022, it will be 0. Okay, similarly for the spherical roller bearings, okay, it is also under a staging category of 3, meaning the duties will be eliminated in year 3. Okay, so under EU-Singapore FTA, all products are committed for elimination except very few lines, okay, which so far Singapore has no exports to. And so for most products that we are exporting to the EU, you can be sure that it will be able to enjoy 0% duties if you can meet the rules of origin criteria by year 5. Okay. Now, so the benefits of this tariff elimination, right, is that it lowers or eliminate customs duties in destination market. So for some products, maybe in certain markets, the duties can be quite high, such that importers are not too keen to actually bring in the products from overseas, so they will source domestically. But now with FTA, which can help to eliminate or lower the customs duty, right, it actually create a level playing field for foreign suppliers, okay, vis-a-vis their domestic suppliers. And in this case, it increased your market access opportunities, as well as the cost savings opportunities, right, can translate into higher profit and market share for you. Now, next, I'll move on to certain provisions, very useful provisions in an FTA that you can apply to your export business. Because, after seeing some of the examples earlier, some of you might be wondering, does that mean that I need to be a manufacturer, manufacturing my goods and ensure that I meet the rules of origin criteria, then I can benefit from the FTA preferential tariff treatment? Okay, so there are certain very useful provisions in our FTAs, especially the ASEAN Plus FTA, which I'll be sharing with you, that even for non-manufacturer, okay, trading companies, you are able to tap on the benefits as well. Okay, the first one is direct shipment. Okay, so for this, it will be useful for manufacturers because under FTA is like as a manufacturer, you are able to control where you source your materials from, and whether you are able to source your materials such that you can meet the rules of origin criteria. Okay, and in this example, we're using Korea-Singapore FTA. For example, you have an importer from South Korea, and you are selling your products to them. As a manufacturer, you can, if your product is able to meet the rules of origin criteria under KSFTA, okay, when it is imported into Korea with the preferential certificate of origin, your importer can enjoy the preferential tariff treatment. Okay, so another example is using CPTPP for exports to Canada. But in this case, instead of applying the certificate of origin from Singapore Customs, under CPTPP, it is based on self-certification. So the manufacturer or the exporter can actually self-certify. Okay, it actually make it faster and reduce costs for the manufacturer and exporter. Next is this provision, which is back-to-back preferential certificate of origin. This is useful primarily for traders involved in break bulk and re-export of goods in the region. Okay, I'm using the example Artiga as an example. Here we have the manufacturer in Indonesia. So they will have to ensure that the manufacturing process meet the rules of origin criteria, and they apply for the Form D. Okay, the goods is imported into Singapore. In Singapore, there is no further processing of the product. Okay, because in Singapore, maybe it's a trading company where they will re-export the goods out to, where the demand is, where their customers wants. Okay, so they will re-export the product to Thailand in this example. But before that, right, they will need to apply for what we call a back-to-back Form D from Singapore Customs. Okay, and with the back-to-back Form D, and when the importer in Thailand receives the goods, they'll be able to enjoy the preferential tariff treatment. So in this example, there are three parties involved: the manufacturer, the trading company. Trading company here, they do not do any manufacturing. Okay, they simply import and re-export, and the importer in Thailand still able to enjoy the preferential tariff treatment. Okay, why is that so? Because these three parties, okay, in these three markets, right, they are under a common FTA. In this case, it's Artiga, the ASEAN FTA. And they already have an agreement that for this particular product, okay, when it meets the rules of origin criteria, which is also agreed among the parties, okay, the parties will will give preferential tariff treatment. All right. So in this case, the back-to-back Form D will not have any information on the manufacturer in Indonesia. Okay, the exporter will be shown as the Singapore company. However, the importer in Thailand will know that the product is manufactured in Indonesia. So another example is like if maybe for a distributor, okay, in Singapore, they import 1,000 units of product from Indonesia factory, a factory in Indonesia, okay, but they are using ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA. Why? Because one of the parties which they are going to re-export to is actually in Australia. So if they tap on the ATIGA, they will not be able to re-export to Australia, as Australia is not part of the ATIGA agreement. Okay, so in this case, the manufacturer in Indonesia, who is also part of Indonesia, is part of AANZ FTA, will issue this form AANZ for the 1,000 units of products to the Singapore company. Okay, here the Singapore company can actually break bulk and re-export 40 units to Vietnam, 400 units to Vietnam, and another 400 units to Australia. It can be at different times, as long as the re-export takes place before the expiry of the preferential certificate of origin, the original one, okay, the one that they received from Indonesia. So hence I put the date here. From Indonesia side, it's exported in January 2019, and the re-export takes place like in April and October. So it's still within a 12 months validity period. So in this case, the importer in Vietnam and Australia can still enjoy preferential tariff treatment. Now the third provision is the third country invoicing. In this case, again, it's three parties involved here. Manufacturer is in Malaysia, and here you will see that the goods and the preferential certificate of origin, right, it's sent to the importing country here in China, whereas the invoice is actually sent to a third party. In this case, we're using Singapore, and Singapore will reissue an invoice to the buyer in China. So in this case, the sales is actually between the Singapore party and the buyer in China. Okay, so this is helpful when the back-end involving function is not co-located with manufacturing function in Singapore. Okay, so in this case, it's like Singapore can be like the finance center where the sales are being clocked in Singapore, but they can move the goods from the manufacturing country to the importing country. And in this case, Malaysia and China needs to be in a common FTA. Okay. Now, so in summary, the applicable provisions, right, to use. So if you are a manufacturer and exporter, okay, the direct shipment will be most suitable or most applicable. Okay, however, I think this is just, what we think is actually most applicable. However, of course, you can also tap on back-to-back preferential certificate of origin. For example, if for a product that you are making, it is supposed to be exported to your customers with some parts or accessories. However, you do not make those parts and accessories. So for the parts and accessories, you can import and re-export. Okay, so you may be tapping on the back-to-back preferential certificate of origin as well. Okay, so if you're a manufacturer, you need to ensure that your product meets the rules of origin criteria, and also apply for the preferential certificate of origin with Singapore Customs before the export of your goods. So for some Singapore companies, if they are buying certain products from you to export, then they may come to you and request for a preferential certificate of origin as well. But if you are a trading company, most likely you'll be tapping on the back-to-back preferential certificate of origin criteria. I mean the back-to-back preferential certificate of origin or third country invoicing. Okay, because in this case, as a trading company, you will need to request for the preferential certificate of origin from your supplier before you can apply for the back-to-back PCO. Okay. I think so at this point, I think we would like to do a poll. Okay, just to get the sense of perhaps which are the applicable provisions that you commonly use, and whether do you think the tariff elimination provision is useful and will be using them or are already using them. Okay, I'll just pause for a while. I think many of the participants are still voting, so for the second questions, we'd like to also find out which of the provisions are most relevant to your company. Do you normally use direct shipment or back-to-back, or you'll be using the third country invoicing? Okay, I think most of you have voted. Perhaps let's take a look at the result. Okay, yeah. So we're happy to know that you will be using the tariff elimination provision in FTA. Okay, as well as we see here a direct shipment method is still most relevant to most of your companies. Okay, thank you so much for voting. Okay, I'll move on to my next slides. Okay, so another very common questions that we normally hear from companies is that, then how do I begin or where do I start? Okay, to tap on the benefits of FTA, especially if you are exporting your products and to enjoy preferential tariff treatment, very important to note is that you need to know the HS code of your product. Okay, HS code is like an identity of your goods when it crosses the border, because the same goods, right, in different countries can be named or called differently. So what is common and globally recognized is the HS code, the Harmonized System Code. Okay, and that is by WCO. And HS codes are are harmonized at a 6-digit level globally. Okay, so knowing the HS code of your products, right, you can also find out whether there's import duties or not in the importing markets. Okay, as well as in FTA legal text, you'll be able to find out what is the rules of origin criteria. So first and foremost is to identify the HS code of your product and the FTA to use. Okay, in my earlier slides, I have already shown a list. Okay, which FTAs to use depending on where your product is going to, the export market, the export destination, and also the last place of manufacturing. Okay. Next is to ensure that there is tariff savings. For some products in certain markets, with or without FTA, the custom duty is already zero. Okay, so then you do not need to use FTA. But if there is a tariff of a customs tariff of 10%, 15%, then under the FTA it can be eliminated, right? So this is where the FTA can come in to help you increase the cost competitiveness of your product. And so to ensure you meet the rules of origin criteria. Third is to keep all supporting documents. Okay, the invoices, your calculation of your cost statements, the HS code of your raw materials, okay, whether then change to the finished product. Okay, all this you need to keep, because it doesn't stop at, when you receive the preferential certificate of origin and your goods is exported overseas. Okay, the importing customs can always do a post audit check, okay, within like 3 years after your product has been exported to the market. So it is important to keep all the supporting documents. And last but not least is to apply for the preferential certificate of origin, either from Singapore Customs or you self-certify, okay, depending on which FTA you use. All right. So this is a very quick 4 steps of how you can plan to use your FTA, use FTA. Right, next, I'd like to share this very useful tool. It's FTA tool called Tariff Finder. So Tariff Finder can actually make your work easier in a sense that, okay, you can get quick answers on tariffs and non-tariff information through this Tariff Finder online database. Okay, this is actually a database by a vendor, Mendel. So we work with Mendel to have this customized to Singapore companies. Okay, for Singapore companies to tap on this database, right, all you need to do is to register one time, the first time, and subsequently you can just log in to access the database. It is free of charge, okay, and you should use it to check your product's HS code. And I like to stress is that the product HS code, right, is actually referring, the product HS code shown in this Tariff Finder database is actually the one of the importing country. So where you indicate country of destination, and the HS code shown here in this database will be that of the country of destination. Okay, so you can find out the MFN rate, which is the customs duty, and the FTA preferential tariff rate. FTA preferential tariff rate is only referring to Singapore's FTA. So if that importing market has FTA with other party, okay, it will not be shown in this database. And it will tell you the applicable taxes and charges, not just customs duty, but it will also show internal taxes, if any. The rules of origin criteria, again, this is referring to Singapore's FTA's rules of origin, and any import formalities. Okay, so it's like a one-stop database where you can find out a lot of the FTA information. Now this Tariff Finder is also, you can also use it on your mobile phone or your well, smartphone or the iPad, tablet. Okay, and we have a video on this. If you like to just know how to use, you can simply go to our website and click on it, and what you see there is really how easy it is to use. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. I hope you will tap on the Tariff Finder if you find that going through the legal text is difficult, to find out the FTA information. You can tap on this Tariff Finder to find out more about the duties, the taxes, as well as rules of origin and FTA to use. And overall, I hope that you find that this sharing is useful. Okay, so before you go, we would like you to also do a quick feedback on our webinars. Okay, so thank you so much for your attention. So if you have any questions, you can send them to in this question Q&A shown on your screen.